How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be talking about The Thing from 2010, directed by Matthijs Van Heijnngen. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce that last name. Sorry, I'm sure I mispronounced it. And stars Mary Elizabeth Winstead. This is the prequel to John Carpenter's The Thing, and not to get on a big long nerd gripe section, but it really does bug me when people refer to this movie as a remake. It's quite clearly a prequel. The end of this movie ties into the beginning of Carpenter's film. You get some people going, oh, it shares similar themes and story elements. A lot of movies that are in the same franchise share similar themes and story elements. That doesn't mean that they're all remakes. I think a lot of people who stubbornly call this a remake are just living in denial that they ever made a mistake. This is a prequel, and it even says prologue to John Carpenter's cult classic film on the back, so it agrees with me. Another one that bugs me is when people call the Friday the 13th reboot a remake. It's a reboot, not a remake. Just look at who the killers are in those two movies. It's not the same story. Okay, packing up the nerd gripe section, getting back to the review. This is the prequel to John Carpenter's The Thing. Gonna go ahead and talk a bit about the plot. No major spoilers, but I do want to say my piece on certain plot elements, and I want you guys to have a basic understanding as to what this movie is about. So no major spoilers, but let's go ahead and take a look at the movie. Mary Elizabeth Winstead plays a paleontologist, and she's there in her lab working, and this guy who's the boss of a big company comes in and says, we found a crazy discovery. I need you right now. If you're in, I need you to come. Just go right now. So she's pulled away really quick. She doesn't quite know what's up, but it turns out that his company has found an alien spaceship frozen in the ice, thousands of years old, and they want her to investigate something from it. She gets to the base, and it's a pretty cool base. There's lots of people roaming around there, so it's a pretty big crew, and they take her in to look at the specimen. It had apparently crawled out of the spaceship and got frozen in ice, so they have this big block of ice with the specimen in it, and she's looking into it. Of course, the boss wants to move in and take samples of it and study it really quickly. She's like, let's move slowly, and he's like, no, we need to take a look at this creature. But before too long, the creature breaks free from the ice and starts attacking people, and as it moves around the base, the boss versus the people who are working debate as to whether they can kill it. It's a very important specimen, but Mary Elizabeth Winstead soon discovers, looking at the cells, that this thing can actually replicate people, and they begin to suspect that it might start to replicate other humans, and then that leads to who can we trust, who might be a thing, very along the lines of the first one. I go ahead and talk about the movie's major pros. First of all, the attention to detail when recreating the sets. I heard they talked about, taking all the film stills and all the notes that they could find on the original set to try to recreate what you saw of this set in Carpenter's original film, and then trying to regress it before it was destroyed to its clean state. I really like those details, and of course, if you're Thing nerds, you'll really like to see more of the spaceship and more of, what may have been this creature's original design. Again, we have no idea what shape he was in at the time, if that's how it was born, or if it even had a shape at all. But to see a more alien version of the original creature was pretty cool, and it is cool to fill in this gap in the story. It actually covers a lot of stuff they did in The Thing from Another World that they didn't do in the Carpenter version, i.e. seeing the thing in its block of ice. So that was cool. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is, of course, a good lead, and it's really cool to see her. And overall, it still is a pretty fun movie, but it does have major flaws, which I guess we should get into. And I'll go ahead and bring up the one that everybody knows right off the bat. This movie uses CGI for the Thing. And the first version of Carpenter's version of the Thing was a very good example of how well practical effects can hold up, and this uses CGI a lot, which a lot of people were disappointed in. Now, the CGI is not the worst most of the time. There are a few shots where like, oh, that did not work. But in general, the CGI is still pretty good. It's not as good as the practical. Now, if you look up a little bit about this, it's actually kind of a frustrating story. They wanted to do this movie completely practical, and they shot it that way, and all they wanted to do in CG was remove wires and mechanisms, as well as add a little bit of things to make it look a little more realistic. However, one of the producers of this movie saw the early footage and said, this looks too much like an 80s movie, which is what they were going for, and insisted that audiences want to see something more modern, and then in turn ordered that CGI monsters be placed on top of the pre-existing practical monsters, and this whole situation is just so very disappointing. To know that there is a practical effects version of this movie, and all that would need to be done would be to get the footage without the monster CGI on top of it, and then spend some money to remove the wires and add in those little bits. They're pretty close to having a cut without all this CG in it, but it would just, mean spending that much money, and I don't know if they can get someone to do that. I still hope that someday we'll get a practical effects version of this movie from, like, say, Scream Factory or something, but that may be hoping a little too much. I don't know. I would love to see the real version of this movie's effects someday, but who knows when we'll get that, if we get it. I don't know. It's a frustrating situation. Now, if we did have the version with the right special effects, the real practical ones, would this movie be perfect? No, it'd be leaps and bounds better, but this movie still by no means would be perfect. We got some other flaws to get into. First of all, this movie, again, wanting to be a modern movie, it relies a lot on the sense of spectacle. Like, when they first find the spaceship, they drive along the ice has a big, sudden, a crack appears in the ice. Their Jeep goes down the crack and it stops halfway, and their headlights shine on the spaceship buried deep beneath the ice. A big, spectacular scene, and then later you get scenes of the spaceship. However, when you incorporate big, spectacular things, it doesn't feel as real or as relatable. You automatically feel like you're watching a movie, and that can be entertaining, but when you're trying to do horror, the idea is you make it feel real. Like in John Carpenter's original version, you get the realistic frozen base, a nice sense of real human claustrophobia. Rather than being big and spectacular, it's small and shut in, and it feels so real. Then, when they get to the elements with the Thing, and things start going crazy, you've already established that you're in a real world, so when things go crazy, you're like, wow, that's happening in a real world, and it's more horrific and crazy. There are other things too. The Thing in this movie starts off very, very aggressive. The Thing will, as itself, not in a disguise, attack several people in the beginning. And overall, this version of the Thing doesn't seem like it's near as smart. Maybe it's just waking up and it's not fully awake yet. It's just like, I'm gonna attack you. And then by the time you get to Carpenter's Thing, it's thinking better. Maybe that's my explanation for it in my head. I don't know. But it attacks several people out in the open as itself, and it's more just like a big, gooey, tentacle monster. And then when it starts pretending to be people and starts doing a disguise. In the original Carpenter, there's long videos talking about how they analyze the footage and how they try to figure out who's where at what time, and it's a bigger mystery. In this one, you pretty much know the thing's exact path, and when it pretends to be something, it usually quite quickly reveals itself. I did like how they tried to do not just the blood test again when they tried to figure out who was the thing. They had a different method, not as foolproof, but I did like that they tried to do something new there. But in general, the thing in this movie just isn't as smart. It's way too aggressive, and it doesn't, hide as well as the original Carpenter one did. So that is a big flaw. The thing just doesn't quite act right. It should be much more sneaky, but it's big and loud, and again, the sense of spectacle being maybe good for some other movies, like, say, superhero movies, but not necessarily as good in a horror movie. Again, there are exceptions that prove the rule, but yeah, that's not the best there. But another thing, too, is the characters. You know Mary Elizabeth Winstead, and you like her. She's a good, relatable main character. And you know the boss, because he's the one that's going to be aggressive and insist they do things his way. And, you understand that character. A lot of the other characters kind of fade into the background, and you forget about them. And a movie where you're supposed to, know the characters enough to guess when they're not themselves, that's kind of not the best. The Carpenter one, you really had a sense of this group had a sense of camaraderie among themselves. And in this one, Mary Elizabeth Winstead hasn't been there forever. She doesn't know all these people, so it's not as tight-knit of a group. If you had it where she had been working there from the beginning, maybe it would seem, tighter, but they all seem strange to her, so how is she going to know when one's acting different? And the audience just doesn't feel as connected to the rest of the characters, and that leads to a big fault with this movie, and it's harder to put your finger on and say, oh, there's where they messed up, that's the thing that's wrong. But this movie's just ultimately pretty forgettable. I watched this movie not too terribly long ago. I try to do fresh watches whenever I'm doing a review, so it's not been too terribly long since I've seen this movie, but I've forgotten so much of it already. I felt like I was forgetting parts of it as I was watching it, and that's super hard to pick out why that is, but it's just kind of a forgettable movie, and I feel like I might just be very negative saying that, because, even though it's forgettable and even though we did cover faults, it's not a bad movie. It doesn't do anything other than the special effects that specifically irk you, and you can sit there and watch it. It's good for, like, say, a rainy day when you just want to, put something on and relax, and it's not bad, I can't say it's bad, but I can't really say it's great, so it's a fine movie. If you want to see more about the earlier parts in the Thing story, if you want to see the spaceship and the creature and the base before it was destroyed, and go ahead and put this on as a double feature with Carpenter's The Thing. Obviously Carpenter's is going to be way better, but there's some cool elements, there's some fun stuff, and other than the special effects, there's nothing particularly terribly wrong with it. It's just, an okay movie, and I guess we'll say that. It's an okay movie, not great, but it's fine to watch once, just don't go out of your way too much for it, and we can watch it multiple times if you want to, but it's fine. That's what I'm trying to say. It's fine, has its faults, but not terrible. Anyway, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you for really helping the channel out. I'll put a relevant playlist down there at the bottom if you guys want to see videos similar to this. Other than that, though, I do like 95% horror on this channel, so if that sounds like something you're into, I'd recommend sticking around and watching other videos. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Have a good day.